Hello and welcome to Narayana IAS. I am Pratik, your faculty for Daily News Analysis. Now students, as part of our Daily News Analysis, we shall be discussing 5 important topics from the Hindu and Indian Express. So let's have a quick brief of the topics that we shall be discussing in today's session. The first article is taken from Indian Express page number 15. The article is about China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Though the article tries to highlight various dimensions between Pakistan and China or CPEC, we shall be focusing on India's perspective on CPEC because that becomes important for the UPSC examination. The second article is taken from Hindu page number 10. Now, in the backdrop of the devastating fire that occurred in a private neonatal hospital in Delhi, the author of the article tries to highlight the health regulations in our country which are very stringent and as a reason difficult to implement. The third article is taken from Hindu page number 6. Now this article highlights a Nata Pratha practice, which is a traditional practice in the rural parts of Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. So NHRC has sought a report over this practice because there is an allegation that the girls of underage are being sold under the garb of the traditional practice. The fourth article is taken from Hindu page number 15. Now this article tries to highlight the increasing prices of food in our country. So in this context, we shall be understanding the Consumer Price Index and the CRISIL report. The fifth article is taken from Indian Express page number 10. Now, Azerbaijan is going to host this year's Conference of Parties for Climate Change. Now, Azerbaijan is trying to convince the warring parties, Russia, Ukraine and Israel, to find a truce. So in this article, we shall be discussing more on the Conference of Parties on Climate Change. So these are the 5 topics that we shall be discussing in today's session. And finally, we shall be discussing few practice questions for you to understand the type of questions that can be expected in the UPSC examination. So students, let's get started. The title of the first topic is As Shehbaz, that is Pakistan's Prime Minister, visits China, the hope and unfulfilled promise of CPEC is the title of the first topic. So again, in this article, it is very important to understand China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, different dimensions associated with CPEC, and you can map this topic under GS paper 2, right? So let's try to go through a PYQ asked in the year 2017. The question was, China is using its economic relations and positive trade surplus as tools to develop potential military power status in Asia. Now, in the light of the statement, discuss its impact on India as a neighbor. Now, students, once we go through this topic, I am pretty sure that you'll be in a position to attempt this question. So, please listen to the topic carefully. The context, as I told you, that the Pakistan PM is on a 5-day visit to China. Why? Because they are focusing on the second phase of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. But the most important question is, what is CPEC? Now, students, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is an initiative launched in the year 2015 by the Chinese Premier President Xi Jinping as part of Belt and Road Initiative. So, Belt and Road Initiative is a geopolitical, you can say geopolitical, geoeconomic, geostrategic. So, this is an initiative of the Chinese government to expand Chinese influence in the world. So, there are 2 components. One is the road component, the other one is maritime component. So China is trying to connect different parts of the world with China, thereby push its manufactured goods and try to make a good profit. So this is what the Belt and Road Initiative is. The objective is to expand Chinese geopolitical influence in the region and outside the region. So under CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, China is trying to construct power plants, road and railway networks, Gwadar port in Pakistan. Now, this Gwadar port in Pakistan provides China with the direct access to Indian Ocean through highways in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Now, let me show you this image or map and try to make you understand how China is using CPEC to connect directly to Indian Ocean. So, students, this is Indian Ocean. Now, China does not have a direct access to the Indian Ocean. Now, India has her influence in the Indian Ocean region. To counter India, as China does not have a direct access to Indian Ocean, China is using this China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and China is trying to connect to or have the access to the Indian Ocean region. So this is the Gwadar port in Pakistan which China has constructed, right? So this is very, very important for you all to understand, right? Now, the article tries to highlight that the infrastructure projects under CPEC have been stalled because of few reasons. Reasons being corruption in Pakistan, then security issues. Now, for example, Balochistan is a region in the northwestern part of or southwestern part of Pakistan, and here people are not happy with the CPEC construction. Why? Because, so for example, the revolutionaries of the Balochistan movement, they are attacking the Chinese nationals. Many of the Chinese nationals have been killed by the Balochistan nationalists or revolutionaries. Now, the Balochistani revolutionaries, they want that the region of Balochistan should be independent. So they are fighting for the independence of Balochistan from Pakistan, right? And it seems that India is indirectly supporting the Balochistan movement, right? Now here, students, if you get to see that because of this infrastructure projects, the people in Balochistan are being displaced, and this is leading to economic and social challenges, and as a reason, the revolutionaries of Balochistan are fighting or are attacking the Chinese nationals who are a part of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. But as I told you, important for us to understand is India's perspective over CPEC. Now, as I told you, CPEC is a crucial component of China's Belt and Road Initiative. The objective of China is to expand her influence through infrastructure projects, right? Now, from India's perspective, India sees CPEC as a strategic maneuver by China to increase its presence in South Asia. Now, traditionally, India had an influence in the South Asian region. Through CPEC, China is trying to take over the influence of India in the South Asian region, right? At the same time, the corridor is running through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Now, the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is an area which India claims to be ours. So, India believes that as the CPEC traverses through the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which means it violates India's territorial sovereignty and integrity. This is first point. The second one is security issues. Now, India has also raised security issues. Why? So, when China is going to invest billions of dollars in China-Pakistan economic corridor, they are also going to get their personnel and the military personnel deployed along the CPEC region, which means we'll get to see the Chinese military or Chinese military's presence in the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And this raises security concerns for our country. So, the development of the road and rail networks along with the Gwadar port, it provides China with strategic access to Indian Ocean. Now, along with threatening India on the land route or for that matter in the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, China is also trying to threaten India's maritime security. Why? As I told you, like the South Asian region, India also has an influence in the Indian Ocean region. Now, China, by gaining access to the Indian Ocean, is trying to threaten India's maritime security. At the same time, as I told you, that in Balochistan, people are revolting against this particular project, right? That's the reason this can also lead to spillover effect in India. The next one is the economic influence. Now, massive Chinese investments in the CPEC might strengthen the Pakistan's economy. Now, if the Pakistan's economy will be strengthened, that will reduce Pakistan's dependence on its traditional supporters like USA and the Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia. Then we have UAE, Iran, etc. Right? So this shift could lead to a realignment of economic and diplomatic relationship in the region, which could also concern India or which has the potential to concern India. Then the potential economic benefits of CPEC to China, such as improved infrastructure, increased energy capacity and economic zones, may enhance Pakistan's economic stability and development, and this could boost Pakistan's strategic leverage in the region. So in a way, this point tries to highlight the fact that the CPEC has a potential to help Pakistan economically, through which Pakistan strategically can become much more powerful in the region, through which Pakistan, along with China, can threaten India's influence in the region. Then the diplomatic dynamics. Now, the CPEC complicates India's diplomatic efforts in the region. The stronger Sino-Pakistan axis could counterbalance India's influence. As I told you, these countries would try to get the support of other South Asian countries like Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, which could potentially harm India's interest in the South Asian region. And again, here it's mentioned that the CPEC violates India's territorial integrity and sovereignty. So environmental concerns. Now, because of the massive infrastructure projects, India claims that the CPEC harms the environment. It might lead to deforestation, soil erosion and disruption of local ecosystems. Why? Because the environmental hazard, it transcends the boundaries of a country. That's the reason it could also impact India environmentally. Right? So again, it could impact the marine biodiversity and fishing communities, and also raising concerns about the sustainable development. Social and human rights. As I told you, that the infrastructure projects going through POK and in the Balochistan region is displacing many of the local people. This is leading to concerns, tensions, and that's the reason there's sort of civil war between the Balochistan movement supporters or separatists and the Pakistani army personnel, right? So again, this can fuel discontent and violence, leading to human rights concerns. And the instability and violence could also have a spill or effect in India. So conclusion is that CPEC, no doubt, Pakistan and China are going to move ahead with the China-Pakistan economic corridor. No matter how hard India tries, the Pakistan will or China will make sure that China pumps in billions of dollars in the CPEC corridor so that China gets access to the Indian Ocean region. India will try her best to ensure that the international community is taking a note of how the CPEC is violating India's territorial integrity and the international law. How the CPEC is violating the rights of the local tribal people in the Balochistan region. Right? So this was the article, friends. I hope you understood each and every dimension of China-Pakistan economic corridor. Students, the title of the next topic is Health Regulation, which needs a base to top approach. So in this article, it is important to understand the healthcare sector and the health regulations associated with the clinical establishments in our country. You can map this under GS paper 2, right? So a previous question asked in the year 2015, the public health system has limitation in providing universal health coverage, right? So such type of questions can be expected in the UPSC examination. So students, let's head to the context. Now, you know that recently a private neonatal hospital in Delhi caught a fire, because of which few newborn babies died. Now, post this incident, the media channels try to highlight this particular issue and try to highlight how the private hospitals without having a license are running the hospitals to the detriment of the common people, right? So the author of the articles try to highlight the healthcare regulations, or talking about the healthcare regulations. So which are the challenges in implementing the healthcare regulations? Now the author of the article tries to suggest that there are many regulations, but the implementation is simply not possible. Why? Because the provisions are excessive and unrealistic. That's the reason it is difficult to implement. For example, the author of the article tries to highlight two legislations. One is the Clinical Establishment Registration and Regulation Act 2010 and the Indian Public Health Standards. Now let's try to understand what is this Clinical Establishment Act. Now the Clinical Establishment Act, it tries to provide a regulatory framework for the registration and regulation of the clinical establishments. The purpose is to improve the quality of healthcare. And it applies to all the clinical establishments, be it private or public. And it applies across the territory of a country. This is Clinical Establishment Act. The purpose is to regulate the clinical establishments, be it private or public. And next is the Indian Public Health Standard. Now, this standards, it sets the benchmarks for what? For infrastructure, human resource, what kind of infrastructure should the clinical establishment have, human resource, equipment, drugs, other facilities required. Now we'll try to understand the problems. Now, again, just a point with respect to the Indian Public Health Standards, this applies or covers various levels of healthcare institutions like primary health centers, community health centers, the sub-district hospitals, district hospitals. Now we'll try to understand the challenges or the provisions which are difficult to implement. The Clinical Establishment Act and the Indian Public Health Standard, it requires specific physical infrastructure standards such as minimum amount of space per bed, specific type of wards, facilities like separate operation theatres. Now, such kind of infrastructure facilities, the smaller clinical establishments simply cannot afford, especially in the densely populated urban areas. It's simply not possible for a smaller establishment to meet this requirement. And that's the reason it is difficult to implement. Next, the regulations, be it the clinical establishment and the Indian Public Health Standards, they often specify a high ratio of medical staff to patients, one, including specialized doctors, nurses, support staff. For example, the Indian Public Health Standards might require a certain number of specialists or nurses per patient bed. Now, again, this is not possible for the smaller establishments. Why? Because of the financial constraint. The next is, the regulation may mandate the presence of advanced medical equipment and technology like the MRI machines or specific laboratory requirements, which is again financially burdensome to the smaller establishments. Now, regulation often mandate the same infrastructure, equipment and quality standards for all types of healthcare facilities, be it a big hospital or a small hospital. Again, as I told you, for smaller hospitals, they cannot afford to meet all the requirements as set by the Clinical Establishment Act and the Indian Public Health Standards. So, it seems, the author of the article tries to suggest that it seems as a perceived bias against the private sector. Why? Because the private sectors have to comply with strict enforcement rules. At the same time, there are long delays in approvals for the smaller private healthcare establishments. Then, because of the way media tries to carry out the news to gain more TRP and the political rhetoric in our country indulge in political blame game, ultimately the healthcare providers suffer. There will be, or it might lead to public mistrust of the healthcare providers. So these are some of the challenges in our country. At times you must have also seen that people being upset with the doctors, they attack the doctors, they attack the hospital staff, right? So what can be the solution? One, realistic and harmonized regulation, that is, formulate guidelines that are practical and can be implemented. For that, you have to harmonize the multiple health regulations and simplify the process. And there should be time-bound approvals to the requests coming from the private hospitals or private establishments. Then there should be differential approach for different facilities. Now, we need to have a differentiated regulatory approach for large hospital and smaller clinics. So, if the hospital is a smaller one or as a small clinical establishment, then the rules or regulatory framework for the large hospitals and small hospitals should be different. Then, before framing the regulations, it is very important for the government to involve the representatives of the doctors' associations, the facility types and the committee members, so that the regulations that the government frames will be possible to implement. So, you need to include the stakeholders. Next, promote primary health care centers. Now, the author tries to suggest that we need to focus on supporting primary care providers who deliver outpatient care at lower costs. Why? So as to fulfill or so as to abide by the National Health Policy, which was framed in the year 2017. Now, this National Health Policy 2017 aims to achieve the highest possible level of health and well-being for all age groups through preventive and promotive healthcare orientation in all developmental policies and universal access to good quality healthcare services. Which means there should be no burden, there should be no financial burden on the people to avail the healthcare in our country. And for the very same, the National Health Policy promotes the use of digital health technology, integration of Ayush, that is Ayurveda, Yoga and Naturopathy, Unani, Siddha and Homeopathy systems, and strengthening the health infrastructure, right? So I hope students you understood this article. Students, the title of the next topic is the National Human Rights Commission has sought report on sale of girls as part of Nata Pratha. So in this article you need to understand about the National Human Rights Commission and the Nata Pratha practice. You can map this under GS paper 2. So there's a question in the year 2014. The question was, the NHRC in India can be most effective when its tasks are adequately supported by other mechanisms that ensure the accountability of the government, right? So the question has been asked on NHRC. So the context is the NHRC had issued notices on Thursday to the Union Ministry of Women and Child Development and the states of Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat over a practice of Nata Pratha. Let's try to understand the practice of Nata Pratha. Now, Nata Pratha, under Nata Pratha, girls in some communities are allegedly sold either on a stamp paper or otherwise in the name of marriage. This practice has no legal sanctity. It is not backed by any law. It is a traditional practice prevalent in some rural parts of India, particularly in the states of Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. This Nata Pratha system involves remarriage of a woman, especially who is divorced or is a widow, right, to another man. This is Nata Pratha traditional practice. Let's try to understand the key aspects of Nata Pratha. It is rooted in the cultural traditions and social norms of certain communities. Second, the new husband, right, the new husband of this girl may provide a bride price or compensation to the former husband or to the woman's family. This is another aspect. Third one is the practice operates outside the form of legal system, which means it has got no legal backing, no legal sanctity. Fourth, it can also perpetuate patriarchal norms and does not always ensure the rights and welfare of the women. Though the people of the committee portray or claim that this particular practice is actually for the welfare of the girls, but it is not necessary that it might lead to the rights and welfare of the women. These are the key aspects of Nata Pratha. Recommendations for eradication. Now, there should be a comprehensive approach to address these social and economic factors. Now, behind such practices where the girls are being sold, it is because of poverty. So, the government has to step in and the government has to make laws. The state government has to make laws to prevent such illegal practices in our country. Right? Then the government has to actively engage the local communities to spread awareness about this practice so that the elderly people can prevent such practices from taking effect, right? So awareness, through awareness, education and employment opportunities can be provided for the girls and women. Now, very, very important to understand NHRC. What is NHRC? It was established in 1993, which means it is under this act, which means it is a statutory act. So, national human rights, which means it protects the human rights. But what are human rights? Now, human rights refer to the rights related to life, liberty and dignity of the individual, which is guaranteed by the Indian Constitution, like we have right to equality under Article 14, right against discrimination, Article 15, right against untouchability, Article 17, etc. Now, the decisions of NHRC are not legally binding, which means NHRC is only an advisory and recommendatory body. Very, very important point for your pre-examination, right? Next, the NHRC has the power to investigate complaints of human rights violations, either suo motu, which means by its own, or on petitions filed by the victims. Next, the Commission can also intervene in any court proceedings involving allegations of human rights violations. Next, the NHRC has got the power to visit jails and see if the prisoners or the rights of the prisoners are safeguarded or protected. Next, the NHRC has also got the power to review these safeguards as provided under the Indian Constitution or any law. Students, the title of the next topic is Food Price Rise Likely Sped Up in May. So again, food inflation is something that is important for you to understand in this article, right? You can map this under GS paper 3 as well as prelims, right? So a previous question asked in the year 2020 was in reference with the consumer price index and the wholesale price index. So you need to know what is CPI and WPI. This is something that you will study as part of Indian economy, right? So what is the context that the food inflation seems that it was increased in the month of May, with the cost of vegetarian meal rising 9% year on year. This was up by 1% from 8% in the month of April, according to CRISIL. What is CRISIL? We'll discuss in some time. Now, this surge is attributed to an increase in the price of tomatoes and potatoes as well as onions, right? So this is the context. Here we get to see inflation in the food. So the consumer price index also recorded food inflation at 8.7% in April, up from 8.5% in March. So we'll understand what is CPI. Overall retail inflation stood at 4.83% in April, with rural customers facing an 8.75% rise. The cost of vegetarian meal rose to 27.8 per person, which was 4-month high, and cost of non-vegetarian meal, right? It dropped 7% due to a 16% fall in broiler prices at rupees 55.9. So again, you don't have to remember the data. This is just for as a part of the news that was in the newspaper, right? What you need to understand is food inflation, CPI, and CRISIL report. So these are the contributing factors is the onion and the potato supplies, the reason behind the increasing prices. Now this is something that is very, very important, CRISIL. Now CRISIL, what is it? It is an Indian analytical company, which means what does it analyze? It analyzes the market, right? It provides ratings, research, and risk and policy advisory services driven by the mission of making markets function better. So the motto is making markets function better. So it is a subsidiary of American company S&P Global with the headquarters in Mumbai. So it's a subsidiary of the American company. It was India's first credit rating body, founded in the year 1988 by ICICI and UTI. In 2005, S&P Global acquired majority shares. Alright. So in April 2024, CRISIL received SEBI approval. This again is very, very important for your pre-examination. So the point is, it is nothing but it is an analytical company. It studies, it researches, and then gives advices so as for the markets to function better. Now, what is CPI? It is nothing but it is one of the indices, right, of retail inflation. It is one of the price indices inflation that records retail inflation, right? So, meaning it tracks the change. So, it is tracking the change in retail prices of goods. So, whenever the prices of essential foods change, it is reflected in the consumer price index, and it is released by the National Statistical Office. Very, very important for your pre-examination. It compiles CPI separately for rural, urban, and combined sectors on a monthly basis. All these points are very, very important for your pre-examination. The base year for CPI is 2012, but now it's increased, or now the base year has been changed to 2016. right? It is also called as headline inflation. Now, as per the Monetary Policy Committee uses CPI data to control inflation. So here, the monetary policy of the RBI is also using CPI data to control inflation. Now, CPI has several subgroups including food and beverages, fuel, housing and clothing, bedding and footwear, right? So each and every point of this CPI is very, very important for your pre. Now, the next slide, if you see the composition of CPI, it has 6 main components with different weights. Again, this is very, you don't have to by heart all the number, but you need to know which one has got the highest percentage or highest weight. For example, food and beverages has 45%. Then pan, tobacco and intoxicants 2, clothing 6, housing 10, fuel 8 and miscellaneous 28%. At least you need to remember the top 1, 2 or 3. Very, very important for your prelims examination. I hope since you understood the article. Students, the title of the next topic is for 2-week COP, that is Conference of Parties 29, host Azerbaijan seeks a pause in conflicts. So this topic is important from GS paper 1 perspective and from mains GS 3 perspective, right? So again, we are going to understand the terms UNFCCC, climate protocols, conference of parties in this particular article. So let's go through a previous question asked in the year 2017. This is with reference to the Global Climate Change Alliance, right? So any alliance, any agreement related to climate change is something that will be always important, right? So these are the statements. Please go through the statements. Now, what is the context? Azerbaijan, who is going to host the Conference of Parties 29, is proposing a temporary truce, that is ceasefire in the ongoing conflicts between Israel, Palestine and Russia, Ukraine, so that the globe can entirely focus on climate change rather than focusing on the ongoing conflicts, right? So Azerbaijan, which has its own historical conflicts with Armenia or the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Now students, it's your homework to see this region in the map. Highlight this region in your atlas map and mark it, right? So that whenever you revise, you recall this region. Now, Azerbaijan had made a peace agreement with Armenia. Now, this actually set a positive precedent example. On similar lines, Azerbaijan aims to convince these countries, to cease hostilities and focus on the climate change issues. Let's understand what is Conference of Parties. Now, Conference of Parties is the supreme decision-making body of the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, supreme decision-making body. In 1992, at the Rio Earth Summit, 152 countries had signed a multilateral treaty called UNFCCC. What is the aim of the treaty? To reduce the greenhouse gases. Simple. It came into the force in the year 1995, that is after 2 years. And since then, countries that are part of the UNFCCC have met every year. There are 198 signatories to the convention currently. Now, all states that are parties to the convention are represented at the Conference of Parties, at which they review the implementation of the convention. So, whichever decisions they had taken in the previous edition, they review it. So, the COP, as I told, it meets every year unless the parties decide otherwise. The first COP was held in Berlin, Germany. Now, COP meets in Bonn. Now, this is the seat of the Secretariat where day-to-day work is undertaken. And the COP presidency rotates among 5 recognized UN regions. And which are these? One is Africa, second is Asia, third is the Latin America and the Caribbean, fourth one is the Central and Eastern Europe, and fifth one is the Western Europe and others. Now, a crucial component of the COP meetings is the nationally determined contribution. That is the contribution of each and every country to reduce the greenhouse gas emission, right? This is what we mean by nationally determined contribution. Now, it is submitted by member countries that are also part of the Paris Agreement. Now, India and France were the ones who initiated this Paris Agreement, or who concluded this Paris Agreement, wherein each and every country had to contribute or had to commit to the reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions, right? Now, the Paris Agreement is also known as COP21, is legally binding international treaty. Very, very important for your pre-examination. So, what is the aim of the Paris Agreement? To keep the global warming below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, with efforts to limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Very, very important point for your pre-examination. I hope students you understood this article, right? Students, it's now time to discuss prelims practice questions. So let's get started. Question number 1, this is about National Human Rights Commission. It was established through an executive body. Wrong. It is a statutory body. Statutory body. So this one is incorrect. It has the authority to intervene in court proceedings involving allegations of human rights violation. This is correct. So which of the above are correct? B. Right. So try to pause once reading the question, after reading the question, and try to attempt the answer. Next one is CPI. Now, CPI is one of the price indices inflation that records retail inflation by tracking the change in retail prices of goods and services from the perspective of a household. Very true. This is what we had discussed in the CPI. Then it is published by the Office of Wrong. This is published by National Statistical Office. So, second one is incorrect. Option A is the correct answer. Next one, CRISIL. Now, CRISIL is Indian analytical company providing ratings, research, and risk and policy advisory services driven by the mission of making. Yes, this is correct. Now, it was India's first credit rating body, founded in 1991 post-liberalization by ICICI and UTI jointly, with the share coming from, this one is incorrect. The year of foundation is wrong. American company S&P have minority. No, they have majority. So this one is also incorrect, which means only one statement, that is option A is correct. Next one, so here we have the events and significant outcome. So COP21, COP16 Green Climate Fund, COP23 Talona Dialogue. So again, here we have discussed the last slide, right? So here the answer lies in the last slide. So all the 3 events are correct. Next one is, which of the following act aims to provide regulatory framework for ensuring the registration regulation of the clinical establishments in India? So again, here it is clinical establishments. Very, very easy. We have discussed this in the article. Now, mains practice question. Discuss the strategic, economic and security implications of the CPEC for India. Very simple question. So in the introduction, you have to mention what is CPI, right? CPI is a geopolitical and geo-economic initiative of China as part of Belt and Road Initiative. Now, in the body of the answer, you have to highlight the strategic implication, that is the geopolitical explanation or influence, how CPEC enhances China's presence in South Asia, right? How China is trying to counter India or reduce India's influence in the South Asian region as well as the Indian Ocean, right? So it is posing maritime risk as well. Then you can also mention the fact that how CPEC strengthens Pakistan's economy and reduces its dependency on traditional allies like USA and the Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia, right? Then try to explain the potential benefits of improved infrastructure and connectivity in Pakistan. Now, Pakistan can emerge as a big strategic country in the South Asian region. Then the military concerns. Chinese are going to place their military personnel in the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, right? Which is going to violate the territorial integrity and sovereignty. And because of the disturbance in the Balochistan region, the spillover effect can also be seen in India. Then in the conclusion, you can mention that again, India's response, you have to mention the diplomatic measures that India can take or India will take in order to make sure that we retain our influence in the South Asian and the Indian Ocean region. So here, economic initiatives, we have to come up with initiatives through which we can support our South Asian countries and the extended neighborhood. Then security enhancements, we have to invest heavily in the security infrastructure so that we make sure that our security is safe. And then we also have to highlight the environmental problems arising because of CPEC, right? And then in the conclusion, we have to maintain our India's stand, that is official stand, that as CPEC passes through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which India claims to be our own, it violates territorial integrity and sovereignty. And that's the reason before proceeding with CPEC, we have to make sure that the countries involved have to take into consideration our problems, our considerations before proceeding with CPEC. I hope since I understood how to write means answer. And that's it from our DNA session, students. I hope you understood all the 5 articles, students. So students, if you want us to continue with our DNA session, do like, share and subscribe Narayana IAS. Thank you so much.